Next.
Let's see here. Next, we've got another new member. Judging by the little sprout on here, it's a WoW lore question. They say
All right.
if you could add side stories in Shadowlands, which decreased characters from the game or books, would you want to see? He feels like the biggest missed opportunity was Broxigar reuniting with Tyrande. His line of thought thinking that Broxar's spirit would be in Ardenweld. I want to just add something to that last part.
Yeah.
The last moment we see of Broxar in the War of the Ancients trilogy,
Yeah.
the dude jumps through the rift and actually wounds Sargeras as the rift is closing on him.
Yeah.
I hate to say this to burst his bubble, but if anything, Broxgar's soul is stuck wherever the hell Sargeras was at that time, if not being like a tormented plaything of Sargeras's.
Yeah, I would say Broxigar is probably not an Ardenweld. Broxigar is most likely in the Twisting Nether. I mean, I could be wrong, but I would argue most likely. Also, we don't know to what extent Broxigar can. Actually, that's a good point, Massey. We never actually found out if Broxigar is dead, and considering how the Twisting Nether works, no time whatsoever may have passed for Broxigar in terms of, being there. Right? So Broxigar could still be having the time of his fucking life in the Twisting Nether hunting demons. And that might be something we explore in a future expansion. So on that front, I don't think that's I don't know. In terms of deceased characters, well, obviously, Arthas. I would love to see an actual story for Arthas play out, because I think the Arthas story was not done the justice that it deserves. Another story that isn't so much about a deceased character, but rather about a deceased kingdom, would be the story of Lordaeron. And what I mean is the interconnected stories of Lordaeron. So an overarching story about the early days of the Alliance before the fall of Lordaeron. What did that look like? Because the images that we got about Lordaeron was always in sort of reference to other things. So we found out about Lordaeron and how things worked in Lordaeron in reference to the invasions. So we found out about Lordaeron and how things work in Lordaeron in reference to the Scourge, but never actually about Lordaeron. And more specifically, when I say Lordaeron, I mean Lordaeron's relationship with the Dwarven Kingdom of Ironforge. How exactly did that work? What was the earliest days of the Alliance, and how was it put together? I want to know specifics. Going back to the Night Elves and their treatment of the Alliance, what exactly happened there? Another story that I would love to see sort of dived into a lot more is Illidan's story, specifically after Illidan was locked into Outland, or thrown into Outland, so to speak. What exactly took place there? Another one that I would like to see, I'm gonna fucking list a lot of them here, but another one that I want to see is the Naga, because we know that some of the Naga followed Illidan. But if the Naga were created by N'Zoth as a gift to Azshara, then which of the Naga chose to follow Illidan, and why? Were they still servants of Azshara when they followed Illidan? So in other words, did Illidan serve N'Zoth, or was this a traitor faction that decided to go with Illidan because they didn't trust? So those are things that I would really, really like to fucking know about. In terms of, if I could answer your question in a more general sense, something that I feel, and I'm so glad, Voicey, that you're asking this question, because it's something that I've been sort of missing in World of Warcraft for such a long time. And it's kind of difficult to explain, but I'll try. we miss substance very often in World of Warcraft on macro level society. So, for example, if I were to ask people in chat right now, what is the culture of the dwarfs? What's their culture? Things they eat, the things they drink, how they greet each other, what they do, how does their mating rituals work? Their religion. Do all of them serve the Titans? Do some of them pray to the Titans? Maybe very few of them pray to the Titans. What exactly is the dwarven culture? Or if I ask you about the elven culture, what exactly is the elven culture? We can reference sort of high-level things. We can reference sort of 40,000-foot view things. But we can't really reference the ins and outs of it. And in my mind, those are the things that are often most important and most overlooked in many ways. We discussed this earlier in the stream as well. If you're writing a character, that character's culture is almost inevitably going to be the most important part of that character, because it's the culture, the way that they were brought up. What are childhoods like for dwarfs? Because that's going to influence how this character is going to act in a very many different ways. What are the relationships like? That's going to change and infect the way that they deal with others around them. These are things that I want to see in World of Warcraft books explored a lot more deeply. Is that sort of what most people would deem completely uninteresting, but for me almost pivotal in storytelling? It is the culture of these beings. Tolkien went so far as to create entire languages for his creations. He wrote pages and chapters upon chapters just on Hobbit culture. And yes, a lot of people fucking found it boring, but for those of us that are lore nuts, those are the interesting things. It's interesting to learn about Hobbit culture. It's interesting to learn about Elven culture. And I wish that World of Warcraft would spend more time actually diving into those things, because I think the World of Warcraft universe is very rich, and it is so ready for a deep dive into those things that isn't just surface level. So you saw this a little bit in exploring Kalimdor, or in exploring Eastern Kingdoms, but not nearly enough. That was the perfect book, right? Those were the kinds of books. Those books should have been 3 times the size, and it should have had an entire chapter on the humans, an entire chapter on the orcs, an entire chapter on the goblins, an entire chapter on every single one of these, explaining their cultures in incredible detail, because those books weren't novels. They weren't supposed to be novels. They were supposed to be codexes almost. This was the perfect opportunity for you to explain these things in painstaking detail so that we don't have to wonder. We have the backstory for all of our beings and all of our creatures. You know, there's a lot of realms, even zones in Azeroth, that have so little backstory to how these zones came to be and where these zones find their place within the world. These are, again, things that I think Blizzard should spend more time actually developing, because the World of Warcraft IP is ready for it. It needs it. So yeah, that's sort of my answer to that question. Any of the characters that I mentioned, or just, you know, sort of more in detail views of cultures and stories and localities that we might not know about, but that is still important for understanding the beings of Azeroth. Because if Blizzard can do that, I think they're going to win so many people to their side when it comes to storytelling. At least that's my opinion.